Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about Ohio State going down to Michigan as well as Miami falling to Syracuse, two teams that put them in really weird spots. They're both out of their conference championships. Miami might be out of the CFP. Definitely a lot of questions around those two programs as they move forward, but let's talk about some two big-time ranked rivalry matchups that we got this weekend, and we'll start with that one that happened down there in College Station, and a huge one, a renewed rivalry in this one, Lone Star Showdown, and Texas does get the win, and it was the defense that did it once again. This Texas defense, I tend to believe, is the best in the country, and they absolutely proved that on Saturday. 248 total yards for A&M, 3 yards per carry, 2 turnovers in this game, including the sealing fumble from Marcel Reed. Remarkable stuff from this Texas defense, really all over the place. And one of the other glaring parts of this game was the run game for Texas. It was really incredible. 243 yards in this game on the ground, and Trey Wisner led the way. 186 yards on 33 carries. Insane stuff from that guy, and you saw him on the bike at the end of the day. He was very tired. Let's just leave it at that. But huge shout out to this offensive line, including Trevor Goosby. He came in for an injured Kelvin Banks. We'll see what happens with that in the SEC championship. And really incredible player, one of the best tackles in the entire country. But you wouldn't have told. Trevor Goosby came in. It didn't feel like anything really changed for this Texas offense. Felt like they had another top 10 pick in that left tackle spot, and maybe they do in Trevor Goosby in a couple of years. But really remarkable stuff from the entire offensive line, and they kind of controlled the day, really from start to finish. And really, the other wrinkle that they added that really helped that was Arch Manning running the ball was a huge factor. With Quinn Ewers on kind of a hobbled ankle, a little bit of an ankle sprain, they did a great job of kind of introducing that to the game plan. Definitely something that I expect to see quite a bit against Georgia, because we saw what Haynes King was able to do. Arch Manning is absolutely someone that can do stuff like that, so it's going to be interesting to watch that unfold throughout the rest of the year, but definitely a fun wrinkle that I think really helps this run game and helps you with those 3rd and 2s, those 4th and 2s, those moments where an extra guy in the box, an extra little bit of confusion definitely does help that a little bit. But for Quinn Ewers, for the starting quarterback in this game, a couple of mistakes, really solid what was a really great performance. Going into halftime, I felt like that second quarter was about as good as we've seen Quinn Ewers play this entire year, included a 26-yard run, which is very weird with the injured ankle and all, but at the end of the day, really good performance overall. Obviously, the tipped pass that ended up into an interception, pick six the other direction, that kind of gave A&M a little bit of life that it felt like they just did not have in this game. He did have a fumble when he was sliding down, and then a blocked punt kind of put Texas defense in some really tough spots. They responded with some great stops, including the one on the goal line at the end where A&M probably should have taken the points, if I'm being totally honest there, especially taking the timeout and then not taking the points is an interesting decision at the very least. But at the end of the day, it was a really remarkable performance from this Texas defense. They were all over the place. They absolutely slowed everything down, and a 10-point win when you score 17 points is pretty impressive. And it's coming off a game against Arkansas where you scored 20 points and you won by 10. So this defense is incredible. It's going to be a problem for absolutely every team, and I think Texas can play this game over and over and over again and probably win a national title. With the defense that they play, with the run game that they've developed with Trey Wisner and that offensive line, they're going to be a problem for absolutely everyone that they play. And it's not going to be a game where it has to be Quinn Ewers taking over. It has to be this offense scoring 45, 50 points. They can score 17, and they can beat you by double digits on the road in Kyle Field. Really remarkable stuff. And I think it's one of those testaments to the program that's been built, the way that's been built up, and the people that they have in that building. Because Trey Wisner is not a guy that I think a lot of people were circling at the beginning of the year. He obviously stepped up huge in this one and became a legend, and now Texas has bragging rights for at least 365 days. They control this rivalry once again, and it was really just great to see those two teams on the field once again, because it was a special one, no doubt about that. But how Texas was able to pull this off, the defensive domination was very real. 2 turnovers forced, multiple fourth down stops, including that one on the goal line, a long carry of 5 yards for the A&M running backs. They were all over the place. Marcel Reed made a couple of plays with his legs. They had a couple of deep passes early in the game. that was about it for this entirety of the game for that offense. The Texas defense just was all over the place, was absolutely suffocating, and made life an absolute nightmare for Marcel Reed in this offense. And then the run game was rolling. 33 carries, 186 yards for Trey Wisner. The offensive line absolutely pushed people around. And then you got a little bit of Arch Manning. You got one touchdown from Arch Manning around the edge where he showed just how athletic that kid is and how dangerous he can be in the run game. And then you won the margins. In a game like this where you have so many things working against you, from the crowd to a lot of the different outside factors, winning those margins is huge. And they had 35 less penalty yards. They were better on third down. They were better on fourth down. They won the time of possession by 10 minutes. They won the margins, and it was huge to kind of keep that margin down the stretch of the game where it felt like there was moments where it could slip away. It felt like if A&M had to drive more than about 50 yards for a touchdown, they probably weren't going to be able to do it. I mean, they had to drive 20 yards for that final touchdown. They couldn't quite do that. So really remarkable stuff from this Texas team, particularly the defense. And where they go from here, I think for A&M, it was a disappointing finish to a really promising year. I think 8-4, if you were coming into this year and I told you 8-4 is how you're going to finish, you had to feel relatively good about that. I think Mike Elko still has this thing moving in the right direction. You need offensive game changers, and it looks like they might just get one in Jerome Miles in a couple of days, and we'll break all that stuff down in the coming week with early signing day on Wednesday. But at the end of the day, they need some offensive game changers. But outside of that, it feels like a program that's heading in the right direction, just didn't quite have the firepower offensively to hold up against Texas. For Texas, this was the period on this regular season. No doubt about that. You're off to Atlanta in year one, and you get to avenge the one loss you have on your schedule for Georgia. So this program just continues to prove itself, continues to prove that they are quote-unquote back, and now they'll try to prove it in Atlanta at the end of this week, and it'll be a really fun game to watch. No doubt about that. One of those games that was an incredible game in the regular season. I feel like both teams have gotten better since that moment, so it's going to be really fun to watch that one unfold. But Texas rolls on 11-1 in the regular season into the SEC title in their very first year. And then you had the Palmetto Bowl, and South Carolina kind of escaped in this one. It was Lenora Sellers, once again, making plays pretty much all over the place. Really one of the most impressive players down the stretch of this season in the entire country. And the run game in general for South Carolina has been elite all year. It was elite on Saturday. 268 yards on 41 carries, a long of 38 for Lenora Sellers in this game, and really kind of controlled the pace in a game that was a little bit up and down at times, a little all over the place, and the defenses were kind of controlling the day for much of it. Being able to control the pace, being able to control the line of scrimmage was huge, and South Carolina did that pretty much the entire day. Now, Clemson was not really able to sustain drives. It was one of those situations where they had 4 passes beyond 20 yards, didn't really sustain anything in terms of getting the ones on the big downs and third down and fourth down, weren't very efficient on passing downs, were just a little bit out of sync when it comes to the pass game. Hit a couple of big plays early, but didn't necessarily sustain that over the entire day. And a remarkable final drive from South Carolina on the other side, where the offensive woes were very prevalent in this game, obviously from the score 17-14. But at the end of the day, they had a really, really impressive final drive. Only one negative play, only one penalty, but was pretty much flawless other than that. And then had a just ridiculous touchdown run from Lenora Sellers to finish that thing off. Shows just how special of an athlete that he is. And on the other side of the ball, we talked about that D-line coming into the day against a rather injured Clemson offensive line. Only one sack on the day, but they were very disruptive. They got pressure pretty much every single down, caused all types of issues, forced 2 turnovers, including just a ridiculous pick from Demetrius Knight at the very end of this game. But really, really incredible stuff from a South Carolina defense that continues to prove that it's one of the very best teams defenses in the entire country, and Lenora Sellers continues to prove that you do not want to see this guy in a one-game scenario, and that's something to talk about. You know, what happens with South Carolina after this game? Now, the good news for Clemson is you're in the ACC title. With Miami's loss, you are in the ACC title, and now you just got to go beat SMU, and you're in the playoffs. So it hurt you a little bit, no doubt about that. No at-large bid in any future for Clemson, but absolutely still very much in the CFP conversation. For South Carolina, I think you're in a really tough spot. I'll be totally honest with you. I don't necessarily think it's going to be a position that you're going to love to be in on when tomorrow's rankings come out, but we'll see what happens. And first of all, let's talk about what happened in this game and how South Carolina was able to get this one done. Lenore Sellers was incredible, and he's been incredible for the past 6 weeks, and I think he's probably going to be incredible in whatever bowl game they play, whether it's CFP or otherwise. But 330 total yards, more on the ground than rushing, or more on the ground than passing, but very much even both ways. 2 touchdowns in this game, a couple of mistakes here and there, but definitely took over late and played really, really incredible football down the stretch of this game. And then talking about that, kind of finishing the job was huge in this one. Only 7 points and 3 turnovers in the first 9 drives of this game. Then they finished it with back-to-back scoring drives, including 9 plays, 75-yard touchdown drive to finish this thing off. Really incredible stuff. I mean, Lenore Sellers took over, and it was one of those things where it felt like that offense had absolutely nothing to give, and then they just all of a sudden flipped a switch. It's a huge moment for them and definitely shows just how incredible this team has been down the stretch of the season, where they can kind of just flip a switch whenever they need to. And then took away the conventional runs. You know, there's so much stuff that Clemson likes to do. The reality is it all starts with Phil Maffa. If he's not going to be able to get rolling, then this run game is going to struggle. They're not going to be able to do the things in the pass game that they like to do. And it was really Cade Klubnik leading the way pretty much the entire day. Had 62 carries for 10 yards. Outside of him, it was 77 carries for 77 yards for 22 carries. Really remarkable stuff from this defensive line, and definitely got Cade Klubnik got away a couple of times, but at the end of the day was able to handle Phil Maffa, and if you're able to do that, you're probably going to beat Clemson most times, at least 9 times out of 10, to be totally honest. But where they go from here, I think for Clemson, you didn't get hurt. Somehow you got helped. At the end of the day, for the CFP race, at least in my mind, you were in the ACC championship. Miami has lost, so now you just got to play SMU for a possible first-round bye. Insane. But that's what the 12-team playoff is. We'll see what happens with the rankings. Maybe they're not in line for that 12-team for that one bye. Maybe they're in a position where even if they win, they would be behind the Big 12. So a lot of questions to be asked, no doubt about that. But definitely one of those things where they're still very firmly in this thing. They're still very firmly in the CFP race. Just got to win one game against SMU. For South Carolina, I just think you're going to be the what if. And I hate to say it because I've really enjoyed watching South Carolina this year. Lenore Sellers is a guy that I think is going to be an absolute star in 2025. But you did lose to Alabama. You did lose to Ole Miss. And I still think it's going to be a program that's going to be really fun to watch the rest of the way. But I just don't think there's going to be enough spots for South Carolina to make it into the field. We'll see what happens in the rankings tomorrow, but I don't think it necessarily bodes all that well for the Gamecocks, and I think those 2 losses to Bama and Ole Miss are probably going to do them in at the end of the day, especially that Ole Miss loss, at least if I had to imagine. But going to be interesting to watch those 2 teams unfold the rest of the way. Obviously, both going into their championships. You know, Clemson coming out on the wrong side this week, but coming out on the right side in their conference championship. Texas, obviously, moving on to the SEC title, and we'll see what happens in that rematch against Georgia. But let's take our second break here, and when we come back, we got some rivalries of the weekend. We got to get into a remarkable 8 overtime game against Georgia and Georgia Tech. We got Notre Dame USC, we got Bama, we got Oregon. Got to talk about them all right after this, so stick with us.